Welcome to the Salty Spittoon. How tough are you?
How tough am I? How tough am I? I had a bowl of nails for breakfast this morning.
Yes, so?
Without any milk.
Right this way. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Ahoy, mateys, and welcome to another episode of I'm Ready, a SpongePod Squarecast. My name is Captain Eric, and we are continuing our sail through the third season of SpongeBob SquarePants. Today's episode is No Weenies Allowed. It is the first half of the 48th episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, and it first premiered on March 15th, 2002. It was written by Paul Tibbitt, Kent Osborne, and Meriwether Williams. Our storyboard artists for this episode are Carson Kugler, Caleb Muner, and William Reese. Our storyboard directors are Paul Tibbitt and Ken Osborne. Our animation director is Andrew Overtomb, and our creative director is Derek Dryman. By far, one of my favorite episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants, bar none. Easy top 10 contender for me. In the grandest scheme of things, it may be my favorite of season 3. It's going to be up there. It's going to be in the top 3. Just a pre-warning for you. But this is just it's stuck with me for so long. All of the one-liners of this episode, and I think for a lot of people who grew up with SpongeBob, who is a part of that current meme culture, the ones who know those SpongeBob like one-liners, like a snap of your fingers. A lot of them can come from this episode. The everything involving the Salty Spittoon is absolutely iconic. All the way, really front and center, is our guest star of this episode, Thomas F. Wilson as Reg, also playing an extra customer here or there of this episode. But Thomas F. Wilson, best known as Biff Tannen from the Back to the Future series, all 3 movies, different iterations of Biff were all played by him. But Thomas has had a tremendous career in his own right outside of the Back to the Future movies. I implore you to go down his rabbit hole of IMDb and find some stuff that he's done. I'm going to tell you to go look at Zach Stone is going to be famous. I love his banter with Bo Burnham. It's some of my favorite bits that he's come out with. A lot of his voiceover work, especially the stuff he's done on SpongeBob SquarePants, has been some of the most iconic characters that we've had. I mean, we just had Flats the Flounder, and here we have Reg, a new character for us in the SpongeBob SquarePants world. One who may be one of the fairest characters that SpongeBob has ever encountered in his undersea adventures. Before we get into the episode, this past Tuesday, Funko did their release of NFTs with the Nickelodeon branding in mind. Now, Funko does NFTs a bit different. I know a lot of people run to the hills when they hear that word, and I did talk about this in great detail on the last This Week in Nickelodeon History. I believe that is episode 45. I'm also going to release that audio separately on its own, but I'm just, for as a quick synopsis, I am very much in the middle of the arguments. I completely understand the positive and negative aspects of NFTs, and I think Funko, by offering a physical redemption option, a part of the release, is at least brings that idea of what NFTs are up to something of like an arcade level for me. I mean, I spend so much of my money in arcades, or at least I have when they were open and I could go. But when I go to an arcade, I spend a good $50 to myself, but stretch that over time, and yeah, you're just kind of, a lot of it is just money you're throwing away, but you're having fun. And collecting is fun, and I love Funko. So, I went in on it. And I have not opened up my packs. I'm going to be recording that for YouTube just to see, hey, if I can get one of the physical ones. But to me, at least, giving that possibility, gamble of a physical pop, it just brings the idea of throwing money towards these up a level for me, instead of just hey, you're just owning nothing if you have the ability to own something. But you can still trade the NFTs with other people in that space group. I joined a Discord that was extremely helpful on the launch day, and all the people there were extremely positive. There was a lot of Nickelodeon fans. I bring all this up because although it was a Nickelodeon-themed drop, SpongeBob SquarePants was not a part of this NFT drop. It was pretty much Hey Arnold, The Wild Thornberries, Danny Phantom, Rocco's Modern Life, Ah Real Monsters, and Invader Zim seemed to be the core group of this drop. But it was labeled as Series 1. So for that, tells me that there's just going to be more series of Nickelodeon down the road. And inevitably, SpongeBob SquarePants is going to be involved in some official way of an NFT. And other than a physical pop being, or even down the road, even if another company gets in bed with NFTs and SpongeBob SquarePants, I just hope that nobody is just making that pure kind of profit off of SpongeBob. I would like to think that somebody out there involved with Nickelodeon can make sure that anything involved with SpongeBob SquarePants can have some sort of charitable donation of the proceeds going to a charity of their choosing closely associated to Steven Hillenburg. I think that would be an extremely fair method of going about this beyond just like, hey, you could possibly win something physical. I like that idea. I think in the NFT world, I think that is a step in the right direction, at least for companies getting involved, is hey, if you pull these certain things, you get these certain prizes. I've heard that brought up of people who bring up like art, like if you have this certain, NFT, you could have dinner with somebody every single year. I've heard that brought up of a certain like, okay, fine, that sounds cool and whatnot, but I don't know. I'm just bringing it up because I sat there at the end of Tuesday and realized knowing SpongeBob wasn't involved, knowing the possibility that it's going to happen, and how does that make me feel? And although I don't like seeing Nickelodeon used in this way at all, it is what it is. Yeah, the anger has subsided, and I'm in the acceptance period of this, as you can tell. But so in the future, we'll see how things go with this. We'll keep an eye on it. Moving on to tougher subjects, including the toughest restaurant in Bikini Bottom, the Salty Spittoon, in which you are judged on your toughness. Now, not only inside of the restaurant, seemingly, but to even get in, you have to be a certain level of tough, or prove that you are a certain level of tough. But this episode starts off innocently enough at the Goo Lagoon, which SpongeBob and Sandy are headed off to. Now, interesting little tidbit about this, but this is the first time that we've actually gone to Goo Lagoon without seeing Larry the Lobster. I found that interesting, that every appearance of Goo Lagoon up to this point has had Larry the Lobster. This one is without, although they really don't spend that much time at the lagoon. They're there pretty much as a setup bit to inevitably get our characters over to the Salty Spittoon. Now, first off, SpongeBob heads over into a changing tent over at the Goo Lagoon to change into his swim gear, quote unquote, but instead decides to put on his karate gear in an attempt to surprise Sandy with an impromptu karate fight. But I'm sitting here thinking, well, what were you expecting to happen with Sandy not bringing her karate gear to the beach? You were just going to wail on her for what, the next 5, 10, 15 minutes while you were there? Or luckily, though, Sandy is always prepared and also brought her karate gear. So when there was a sneak attack from SpongeBob, immediately after he put his gear on in the tent, she ambushed him with a well-rounded kick through the mouth, through the throat, through to the back. SpongeBob he has this moment of realization of, oh yeah, she brought her gear too. This is great. And he's just kind of staring off into just space at that moment. It's one of my favorite moments in this episode, actually, is that moment where he's got Sandy's foot stuck in his mouth and he's realizing that his whole planned ambush is just completely done and sunken. They immediately start, trading some karate moves back and forth. During this exchange comes a extremely iconic SpongeBob moment in which SpongeBob lands feet only into somebody's potato salad. A potato salad that apparently took 3 days to make. And I just want to say, I think it's great that there are 2 Nicktoons out there that have really iconic jokes involving potato salad. There's both Rocket Power, who, Sam's one of his most iconic moments is his disdain over somebody accidentally getting some sand in their potato salad and constantly talking about it throughout the rest of the episode. And then we have here this poor family trying to enjoy their picnic with a 3-day potato salad. And here comes SpongeBob's dirty feet. I'm guessing dirty. I mean, I imagine he keeps them clean, but still, he's in socks and shoes, walking around, playing karate. He's bound to be sweaty in there. But either way, you got somebody's feet in your potato salad. But yeah, truly an iconic moment. I highly recommend looking up Binging with Babish on YouTube. He has made several SpongeBob episodes, one of which involved him making a 3-day potato salad. So definitely go check that out. He has also tackled a few other SpongeBob related foods, including the Krabby Patty. He's also made a few of Bubble Bass's ridiculous orders. Highly recommend his work. Definitely check that out. Eventually, their fight leads them to the line of the Salty Spittoon, a eatery in Bikini Bottom that is very exclusive. Only to the toughest of tough are allowed in to the Salty Spittoon. Now, realistically, the Salty Spittoon is a bar. Is definitely going to be a dirty, dingy bar that has a clientele that is loyal to that bar, who have probably been attending Saturday nights, Friday nights, every, week, year after year, some for decades, probably some who have been going since the place first opened. But from the sound of it, it seems like there are a lot of angry confrontations going on in the Salty Spittoon, and I am not sure how any of these gentlemen are enjoying their drinks or if it's that worth it, but they want to be around tough people, and I honestly think it's just probably kind of like Fight Club, a place where people are just looking to kind of roughen up a bit and looking for a fight, looking for a challenge. There's guys, it's kind of being Irish. You hear the idea of like bar fights and whatnot, but there's always this idea that in Ireland, if you get in a bar fight with somebody and it's a good enough bar fight, you'll end up being friends with the person. Like, you'll just befriend them. And that kind of trope has been used a few times in some media. And I imagine that's a part of the insides of the Salty Spittoon. We'd never see the inside of this place, so it's all in your head of what is going on in the inside. What are the characters doing in there, other than some of them clearly fighting? The second we get to the Salty Spittoon, I advise you all to pause right when the character getting flung out of the spittoon is seen, because it's so quick. I don't know if you noticed, but it's actually an extremely buff starfish. It's a really funny design, and you see it for a split second, but it's like a really buff Patrick looking character. Like, his cone head is actually not as pronounced, but you can tell it's absolutely a starfish that's just getting knocked out of the Salty Spittoon. Now, the man in front of SpongeBob is, although an extremely intimidating man to be speaking with, he's pretty informational about the kind of clientele that the Salty Spittoon is looking to let into their establishment. Now, this man has no problems showing off just how tough he is. The guy is able to produce muscles on his eyeballs. So right then and there, hey, you can go right in. But not only that, he doesn't pull out that trick for Reg, because Reg, we meet right here in this situation, is the doorman, the security of the Salty Spittoon. He is the man in charge. You are not getting into this place without Reg's approval. And what we end up finding out is you would think that Reg would be an extremely negative, almost antagonistic type creature towards SpongeBob, but he is in fact one of the fairest, like, mature characters that SpongeBob has ever run into. But when you get up to Reg, he's going to ask you a question. Welcome to the Salty Spittoon. How tough are you? Right then and there, you have an opportunity. You have your elevator pitch time to tell Reg how tough you are. And I guess you just have to be kind of convincing in it, because you can seemingly say whatever you want. It's not like the guy asks you to prove it. The fish that was in front of SpongeBob, instead of being able to just flex his eyeballs again, because I think that'd be a pretty good bar trick to show off that you could do to get in, but he tells Reg that he enjoyed a bowl of nails this morning for breakfast. Now, it's really funny is Reg's response to this is like, oh yeah? Like, acting as if that's an easy task to do. That there's plenty of people who wake up every morning and enjoy a bowl of nails for breakfast with milk. See, the milk is the key, because his response to Reg is that he did it without any milk, and Reg immediately breaks and lets this guy go into the Salty Spittoon. Like, whoa, all right, you can go in. How milk is apparently the magical item that'll let you enjoy a bowl of nails for breakfast. Just remember that. Right after that fish is led into the bar, next up is Sandy, and I really like that instead of just assuming that Sandy and SpongeBob are not tough enough to get into the Salty Spittoon by the way they look compared to all of the other fish that are being let into this place, he asks them fairly. Welcome to the Salty Spittoon. How tough are you? Now, Sandy, instead of using her words to explain how tough she is, fully physically explains how tough she is. I'm guessing she did this as a statement, as a point, to just, hey, you can never question this again, like, ever. It's not like she has to say something that impresses Reg and then he can question her later on. Like, this is something that will cement her Salty Spittoon membership for life if they have that. I imagine, like, the fact that they have a doorman and they're selective about letting people in. I mean, of course, any bar can turn somebody away. Obviously, they have to card people and whatnot, but there also could be some sort of like a membership, a part of being a patron of the Salty Spittoon once you get in. But Sandy decides Reg has a massive tattoo on his chest, a very classic cartoon tattoo of a big old heart that says mom in the middle of it. The cartoon, it's just when you think of biker tattoos, it's one of those classic ideas that they have, is the heart that says mom. Sandy rips off Reg's tattoo and replaces it back upside down. So now that he has a upside down heart on his chest that says wow. And Reg responds accordingly and allows Sandy to go right into the Salty Spittoon. She's looking for a good time. She's excited about going in. But next up is SpongeBob. He asks SpongeBob fairly, hey, welcome to the Salty Spittoon. How tough are you? SpongeBob immediately asks for a bottle of ketchup, and I love the idea that Reg, he has a bottle of ketchup on him, which is funny, but I love his demeanor is kind of, he's interested to see what SpongeBob does with this bottle of ketchup. He's not like scoffing at the idea at all. He actually is like, I wonder what this guy is going to do. Watch his expression when he hands over the bottle. It's clearly, now I don't know if just straight up opening the bottle of ketchup is a sign of toughness. SpongeBob, of course, is unable to open up the bottle of ketchup, which was his plan all along as his sign of toughness. Maybe that could be the joke, that some of these bottles can be hard to open and that opening one up is a sign of toughness. But I don't know what other ideas maybe Reg could have been thinking of. He was just open. Maybe in the history of his career at the Salty Spittoon, no one ever asked him for a bottle of ketchup in proving their toughness. So I can understand the interest there. But of course, SpongeBob is unable to open the bottle of ketchup and is unfortunately let down from going into the Salty Spittoon. Reg, although he is stern with SpongeBob, He is fair with SpongeBob. He is stern but fair, which I think is tremendous. He is very honest with SpongeBob and in knowing that he would not be able to handle himself going into the Salty Spittoon. Now, honestly, if they wanted to, if they're going to be using the rules of the bully, SpongeBob could absolutely last in the Salty Spittoon. He's made of sponge, you see. So if anybody goes up and punches him, they're going to, be punching a soft pillow like Flats the Flounder did in that episode. So SpongeBob could enjoy himself in the Salty Spittoon, but like I said, sometimes they use his sponginess to his advantage, and then sometimes it's just kind of ignored for the story's sake. I'm fine with it either way. It's not like I have a preference here. But for all things considered, I really like the back and forth that SpongeBob and Reg have in this episode. SpongeBob is very persistent on getting into the Salty Spittoon. Sandy has been in there and seemingly enjoying herself. She hasn't come out looking for him. So he's trying to get back, continually get back in throughout the rest of this episode. Another, iconic moment we have here, especially for memes, is the scene in which SpongeBob explains as another reason for his toughness is that he stubbed his toe the other day and only cried for 20 minutes. Now, as anybody knows, stubbing your toe can be, even the most simple stub can be the most extremely painful experience. And I'm sure there are those out there who have cried for 20 plus minutes over stubbing their toe, and that's completely all right. But I love that that's his next pull. It's opening up bottles of ketchup and then crying for only 20 minutes after stubbing his toe. But of course, he is not allowed into the Salty Spittoon. Reg instead recommends another restaurant across the street, Weenie Hut Junior's, a classic SpongeBob restaurant, one that precurses the Krusty Krab in building a second restaurant right next door, because Reg wasn't actually looking to send SpongeBob to Weenie Hut Junior's. He was looking to send him to their sister restaurant right next door, Super Weenie Hut Junior's. So Mr. Krabs, not the first one in Bikini Bottom to be so greedy that you must build a secondary restaurant next door. Or not even greedy. I mean, hey, if you have that much clientele, building a second restaurant is smart. Building one on the other side of town, building one in different parts of Bikini Bottom would be smart. Building one immediately next door is comical. But Weenie Hut Junior's did it here, and Reg sends SpongeBob over to Super Weenie Hut Junior's. Now we get to meet the other location that we primarily stay in with this episode, the inside of Weenie Hut Junior's. SpongeBob, although he claims to not be a weenie, keeps coming back and back to this chain of restaurants, and even according to the bartender at this place, because we don't even get to see the full restaurant. We just primarily get to see that it's a weenie bar. They also serve ice cream as well, which I don't know. Hot dogs and ice cream are a weird mix with one another. I don't know. I can't get my mind off of the possibility of some dirt dog water getting in with your ice cream. I mean, you'd be able to taste it either way. I don't know. It's just, I wouldn't go to Super Weenie Hut Junior's. I wouldn't go to Weenie Hut Junior's. I would not attend one of these places. Would I want to go to the Salty Spittoon? Maybe. If I had people who wanted to attend with me, I was going in a group. Sure, I think I'd be able to get in. I think I'm tough enough to get into the Salty Spittoon. Captain Eric could get right into that restaurant. Back at Weenie Hut Junior's, we are introduced to 3 new characters for this episode. A bartender of this weenie bar, a robotic bartender, and 2 nerds who are sitting at the bar, each of which are voiced by writers of this episode, Paul Tibbett and Kent Osborne, also the storyboard directors of this episode. I absolutely love their banter. Their conversations they're having with one another are hilarious. I think the voices come across really genuine here. Not that they sound nerdy, but just they sound like, two guys who are just enjoying each other's conversation, not bothering anyone else. They clearly are friendly with one another, being colleagues working on the same show. So I think that's what comes through in their performance here, is just they sound like they genuinely enjoy talking with one another. But they are very friendly with SpongeBob, but they also kind of want him to accept that he could be a bit of a weenie. And the butler throughout this, I keep thinking like robotic butlers. The bartender with a massive handlebar mustache, absolutely love it. Like a really big, like one of those twirl mustaches, ones that like an evil, like Snively Whiplash would wear. But yeah, this bartender is very, being a robot, is like very honest with SpongeBob and calling him a weenie and being kind of condescending to him. And I think that's why he's a robot, because if you have an actual character here telling SpongeBob, like, you are a weenie, I think then it becomes a bit meaner, or then, makes a character look a bit more negative in that light. But the fact that it's a robot, it could just kind of get away with being a jerk. And you just accept it. Like, oh, well, it's a robot. It's just bad programming. That's it. All right, that robot's a jerk. But SpongeBob, throughout these ordeals, he keeps coming back to this restaurant and claiming that he's not a weenie. These nerds, their advice to SpongeBob is to get into the Salty Spittoon. He should first begin with getting a cool hairdo. That a hairdo is key into getting into that place, and that, he has seen people go in with a good hairdo, and that going in bald would be a mistake. Now, the other nerd explains that he has seen somebody get into the Salty Spittoon who was bald, and they have an argument over it being a shaved head, and that whether or not a shaved head isn't considered a hairdo or not. And all I got to say is, if you're going to tell me that bald isn't tough, then I'm going to immediately send you into the direction of the Texas Rattlesnake, Stone Cold Steve Austin, who has been bald for decades and is one of the toughest SOBs on this planet, bar none. That's the bottom line. And bald, there's nothing wrong with being bald. In fact, I find that in most cases, if you are your hair is thinning, it's kind of better to just accept it, because in most cases, a bald head looks completely fine. I think there's that fear of having it, but there's countless videos on the internet of guys just coming to terms with how bad their hair could look at a certain point, where you're just trying to hide it and do other things to ignore the fact that it's thinning, and they accept it, and then they shave their head, and then they go, oh, you know what? Looks pretty good. Looks nice. I think King Neptune should take that advice as well. But although it's hidden behind that crown, he could last a few more years. Anyway, but yeah, a decent hairdo is what's going to get you into the Salty Spittoon. They recommend going down to the wig shop and getting a good wig. This next scene is one of the best in this episode, in which we get SpongeBob walking up to the Salty Spittoon with a wig on, a slick, like 70s black hair piece with giant sideburns, and it's slicked up, and SpongeBob is acting completely nonchalant to even knowing who Reg is, and he's out of town. He just walked into town, and he heard that this was a good establishment for a tough guy. Now, Reg just sees SpongeBob in a wig, because this guy is dressed up exactly like SpongeBob. Reg goes to pull the wig off, and upon realizing that the wig is not getting pulled off, at the same time, SpongeBob walks up in a rainbow clown wig, into which Reg realizes that the person whose hair he grabbed is a different character than SpongeBob SquarePants, although they look exactly the same beyond the hair pieces. This is a big deal, because this is the first time we've seen another sponge underwater that has a square shape. All the other sponges we've seen thus far has been circular, more sea sponge-esque, and there's this other character that not only looks exactly like SpongeBob, sounds like SpongeBob, dresses like SpongeBob, but just happens to have a nice luscious head of hair, or at least has that wig tied down really good. But Reg lets that guy in after messing up his hair, realizes he's made a mistake. I love that SpongeBob, that to me is one of the funny bits right here. That, the fact that he walks up with a clown wig. it's definitely the question was asked, if you walked into a wig store, what would be the worst wig to walk out with in this situation? And of course, SpongeBob thinks a rainbow clown wig is what's going to get him into the salty spittoon. It's endearing to the character, but Reg isn't having any of it. He's not letting him into the restaurant. Right after he is denied, another fish walks up for entry, a fish that Reg recognizes, a big hulking fish with these massive arms, sporting a new tattoo that Reg points out, a tattoo that the man can actually make the tattoo dance as he flexes his arm back and forth. Of course, this man's arm is the inspiration for the Season 3 YouTube screen as these episodes play. Now, this is very late in the episode, but I imagine if you're on YouTube and you're listening this far in, if you like the art, I definitely would like to know. Or if you have any other ideas as far as what you would like on the screen in YouTube, that would be something you can bring up, because as far as the audio, other than eventually bringing this into video form, which maybe down the road. This Week in Nickelodeon History has a better chance of coming out with a video version first before the Squarecast does. There's just a lot more editing that goes into this, and a little bit more meticulous than I would want as a video. But who knows? We'll consider that down the road. But anyway, yeah, we have this tattoo guy here. He's able to make his tattoo dance. Reg points out another tattoo on his other arm that this man seemingly forgot he got, which is a tattoo of my favorite cartoon character, SpongeBob SquarePants. What a guy. Although it's SpongeBob pretending to be a tattoo in this guy's arm. And when the guy has to flex, Reg, responds like, what does it do when you flex on that arm? And he flexes a bit. SpongeBob has to improvise a little bit of a dance. And Reg immediately knows what's going on, rips SpongeBob off of the guy's arm, which really confuses the guy, because he must have really thought there was a tattoo there for a second. But yeah, SpongeBob gets ripped off of the arm and is once again told he is not let into the salty spittoon. And now yet again, we are introduced to a few other characters trying to get into this restaurant, two of which who start a fight in line. And there's a bit here that I actually used as an adolescent teen. But in part of this argument, when the guy responds with, are you calling me a liar? And the response to that from the other fish is, I ain't calling you for dinner. And yeah, I actually used that a few times. If anybody had ever said that for a few years, if anyone ever said, are you calling me a liar? My immediate response for the joke would be, I ain't calling you for dinner. I can only remember one person where that ever worked on, where they got the joke and they were like, oh, that's funny, diffuse the situation immediately. Everyone else, no, did not get that joke. And at this point in history, I can't even recommend that as a good response, because this is as iconic as this episode is. People in that moment may not remember it, and the explanation is not worth it. So I can't recommend using that in an actual argument here. But these two get in a fight in which SpongeBob gets dragged alongside of. Reg diffuses the fight immediately by stopping it and letting the guys both go in, that they prove their toughness. And both men seem like tickled by this. They're like willing to just drop everything. Hey, they're allowed to go into the bar. Everything's good. SpongeBob claims that he was also a part of that fight, although he was just kind of dragged into it, clearly beat up, was trying to run away from it, was not fighting or physically involved in that fight at all. Reg knows this and still declines SpongeBob entry into this establishment. But now SpongeBob has a goal in mind, and his goal is getting into a fight with somebody in front of Reg, because I guess if you get in a fight, you're tough enough to get into the salty spittoon. He goes to snap his knuckles, crack his knuckles. He does snap his fingers. That's the confusion there. He goes to crack his knuckles and in turn snaps all of his fingers off, which prompts him to cry away. A reasonable response to that kind of injury. But we find him back at the Weenie Hut Juniors with his hands inside of a bowl of ice cream. And we get this bit in which SpongeBob claims that his friends do not dine at this establishment of Weenie Hut Juniors. And we get the reveal that, in fact, Patrick is not only at the restaurant right there next to SpongeBob, but is, in fact, a consistent patron of Weenie Hut Juniors. He knows all of their big, like, promotion days, Mega Weenie Mondays, which has been moved to Wednesdays. I think I have a list of the promotions here. These are all absolutely. So we got Mega Weenie Monday, Monster Weenie Monday, Double Weenie Friday, which was formerly Double Weenie Wednesday, and Super Weenie Sunday. They have all these like promotional days for their hot dogs. That's pretty funny. I love that now Patrick gets involved with the situation. He is the perfect character to bring into this episode at this moment, because Patrick is a tough character. He could easily get into the salty spittoon if he wanted to, but he wants to help his friend here. And there's an idea that is brought up that they should fake a fight in front of the salty spittoon, because if Reg sees them fighting, it'll gain SpongeBob entry into this bar. They agree that this is a great idea. But I don't know if SpongeBob really clued in Patrick as to what this would entail, because as they're in front of Reg, in front of the salty spittoons, trying to start a fight, SpongeBob starts hurling insults at Patrick to get this fight started. And I don't think Patrick was really expecting that. But the one word that really triggers Patrick is when SpongeBob calls Patrick Tubby. Patrick does not like being called Tubby and immediately becomes incredibly sad about this. We get a wide range of emotions from Patrick here that go from extremely sad to then extremely angry about somebody calling him Tubby, like nuclear level angry that he is about to beat up SpongeBob for real over this. And SpongeBob reminds him that they were supposed to fake fight to get SpongeBob into the bar. Kind of calms Patrick down, back to earth, enough so that we get another massive emotion for Patrick in his heart. His love of SpongeBob, his friendship with this guy is enough that he's willing to kick his own butt in front of Reg, to have SpongeBob not do an ounce of the work. You don't have to lift a finger, buddy. I'll do all this myself. He then proceeds to beat himself up with nobody else around. Like, Patrick completely convincingly is getting beat up by somebody invisible, and the animators do an absolutely fantastic job in this sequence. Every bit that Patrick does to himself is hilarious. Every punch, every whack of an object, seemingly picking him up, slamming him on the ground. Of course, the wedgie in Patrick's butt is an iconic moment in this episode. Of course, then Patrick giving himself the big boot, sending him across the sky, far away. Reg at this point is blown away. He has never been this impressed, I imagine, of any patron in front of the salty spittoon, proving their toughness. You beat up that guy without even touching him. He immediately lets SpongeBob into the salty spittoon. SpongeBob, of course, has to pronounce his extreme happiness at him finally achieving this moment. And the second SpongeBob enters the door, we are cutting to an ambulance shot. An ambulance with its lights, its sirens on, its lights going, driving down the street. SpongeBob in the back of this ambulance with Sandy next to him, asking what had happened. He got knocked out after he ran inside of the salty spittoon and slipped on an ice cube. He didn't get into a fight. He didn't get into a tussle. No issues. Ran in, immediately slipped on an ice cube, passed out. Ambulance took him away. He couldn't even last in the bar. They immediately drive to the hospital and to just pour salt on this guy's wound. Once the doctor hears that SpongeBob is here because he slipped on an ice cube, he recommends the hospital right next door, Weenie Hut General. And we get the final bit of this episode, which is that there is an entire Weenie Hut medical facility, and the Weenie Hut branding can be applied to pretty much anything at that point. I mean, if you're selling something beyond if you're going from hot dogs and ice cream to then a hospital, I got to imagine everything in between there is on the table for branding. But that is no Weenies Allowed. An absolutely hilarious episode from beginning to end. I love the story arc we have here. I love that in the end, SpongeBob gets his way, but then it gets ripped away from him in the most hilarious fashion possible. It's not like I love seeing SpongeBob like kind of fall down and have the world fall down on top of him, but you know, sometimes these characters who do have an extreme level of luck, especially when Squidward is involved, sometimes they have to get their episodes, they got to take their lashings too. And that is this week's Squarecast. I really appreciate each and every one of you for listening. Thank you so much. If there is any way that you can help see this ship grow by any means, please do so. If you can like the video, share the video, subscribe to the Captain Eric YouTube channel. If you're listening to this on Spotify, sharing the Spotify link of our show to possible other fans is a big help on getting the word out so that we can build a massive crew here. And by the way, there'll never be any sort of monetary entry. I just like having a lot of you here. I want to talk more about SpongeBob with you guys and more Nickelodeon, more Nicktoons, wrestling, if there's any fans out there of that, movies and television shows. I want to talk about anything with you guys. Just never forget, you're not alone out there in the world. So please stay safe, everyone, and have a wonderful week. We'll see you here next time.
Oh, yeah. No, please wait.